is not his fault. He's a Fey male, and she's his female.
Gouging my eyes out now.
Hello, my name is Lorian, and this is the first video I've ever uploaded here, but I felt particularly compelled to do so because I just finished reading the latest from Sarah J. Maas, A Court of Silver Flames, and I have a lot of thoughts and some things to say. I almost couldn't remember the name of this book. I just have it written down as A Court of Courts and Courtses in my notes, which is not very helpful. If you don't remember or haven't read this series and don't know what it's about, and are actually anyone watching this video, this is a spin-off from the popular Court of Thorns and Roses series by Sarah J. Maas,
which follows Feyre in a fantasy world with a human realm that borders a Fey realm. There's a Beauty and the Beast moment with Feyre, and she has this High Lord Tamlin, they have a moment.
Spoilers if you haven't read those books and are planning to do so. She's not actually meant to be with Tamlin, the take-advantage-y, dark, villainy dude who's the High Lord of the Night Court, Rysand. Pretty sure it could also be Rhysand, but I like Rysand better, it sounds better. Rysand is actually the one for her and actually her mate. She also has two sisters, Nesta and Elaine. They are sort of like the stepsister equivalents in a fairy tale, except they are seemingly going to be our main characters in these spin-off series. They are forcibly made in A Court of Thorns and Roses.
In this thing called the Cauldron.
And then there's a big battle. Everybody's pretty traumatized, especially Nesta, our new protagonist in A Court of Silver Flames. She also has this ongoing will they, won't they,
But absolutely freaking will.
with Cassian, who is the brother of Rysand. Before I read A Court of Silver Flames, I read the novella that sort of bridges the gap between A Court of Thorns and Roses and A Court of Silver Flames and the continuing spin-off. It's called A Court of Frost and Starlight. Now, how I remember that better than A Court of Silver Flames, I don't know. This novella was 250 pages, and if you ask me, that's a novel, not a novella. I have a couple thoughts to share, not very many. We'll get through them pretty quickly. Biggest question I had was why all the gifts were so monogrammed. Like, Feyre's initials were on everything. It's like 40-year-old white woman shit, and no shade if you like monogramming things and you like your stuff to be monogrammed, like that's cool, that's great and all, but it was like a fixation in this novel, like upper middle class family at Christmas level. I feel like it shouldn't have to be said, but it sort of feels like it does after having read this book. Thinking about children, more specifically your future child, should not be what gets you there in the bedroom or up against the cabin wall. Yeah, that's all I have to say about the novella. Moving on, A Court of Silver Flames. This book was 758 pages long. I don't know why. I don't know what happened to fill all those pages, but it is. Nesta is a baddie. She's a lone wolf who don't need you, but absolutely does. When we start off the book, she is drinking pretty consistently and sleeping with strangers every night, sort of self-medicating because she's pretty traumatized. Makes sense. Her sisters and their constantly mentioned found family are like, whoa, Nesta, you're not doing so hot. And they devise a plan to send her off to one of Feyre and Rysand's many houses to train with Cassian in what is a thinly veiled romance plotline, but also like a trauma healing slash Nesta works at a library. I don't know. It's a trifecta, if you ask me. Right off the bat, something to get off my chest. I swear to God, if I ever hear somebody say like calls to like again, it will be too soon. And not only that, I feel like I heard it so many times in this book, it's become sort of like hypnotized into my brain, sort of like Zoolander style. Like, if I hear it again, I'll snap and who knows what I'll do or
What will happen?
in any case, I think most notably, Sarah thrives writing worlds that are sort of ruled in patriarchies and steeped in misogyny, but for the purpose of making male leads feminists who empower the female characters, like every single book, every single time, rather than the female characters empowering each other or empowering themselves and overthrowing patriarchies and generally just being boss bitches all on their own. This book finally gave us like a little snippet of what it might be like if these female characters had more empowering relationships with each other, or even just relationships with each other. But that was sort of drowned out by other things. I think it's well documented, along with the whole feminism thing with her male leads, that Sarah J. Maas sort of writes in a way that it doesn't feel like it was written by a woman or even for women. It sort of almost even feels like it was written for men and by a man instead of, you know, the actual audience of the book, which is primarily women. I also really honestly found just about everyone except for Nesta and her gal pals to be incredibly annoying in this book. And even Nesta herself was annoying just in conjunction with Cassian and whatnot. Cassian is low-key, high-key the worst, and I found myself wanting to punch him in the face pretty much any time I had to picture his face or his rippling muscles while Nesta thirsted and pined after him.
Feyre was also pretty annoying. Rysand was extremely annoying. All of them were.
And not to say that they haven't been in the past, but they were particularly annoying here. Gwyn, best character. Even Asriel was alright, but I know he's gonna be a male lead in probably the next book, and I believe that will be ruined for me too. So I actually appreciated a lot that Sarah decided to include trauma so up front and center in this novel. I thought it would be refreshing, actually. I was kind of excited for that aspect. But I think that it was not delivered well, which is especially disappointing since it's not often included in books like these. And I found it to be sort of edging, on trauma porn. I also take issue with the YA nature of the previous books. And I know this one was considered adult, but I still think it's going to draw in that young audience. And regardless, the previous books have been considered YA. And I think it can be pretty negative to internalize things from these books that are, they incorporate a lot of toxic behaviors and narrow stereotypes that are really easily absorbed by young audiences or any audiences. They definitely contribute to a lot of negative internalization for me, even in the process of reading this book. More on that later. That's it for things not related to spoilers. Everything from here on out will be from mild to heavy spoilers, so continue at your own risk. Probably my second biggest issue with this book, maybe first, a big issue with this book was the removal of Feyre's autonomy of her own body when it was a decision made to not tell her about the dangers of her pregnancy and birth. Not only is that lying to her by omission about her body, but it's also taking away her ability to make choices about her body and decide how to handle that. Like, I thought you were a feminist, Rysand. I mean, her body, her choice, sort of one of the biggest things in feminism. That also means her body she should know so she can make her choice. How messed up would it be to not tell someone they had cancer or something like that? But that aside, when rightly so, Nesta sees the parallels between her sister's situation with the dangers of her pregnancy and everyone voting on whether or not she should know about the extent of her abilities, really just know herself, which obviously she should. I was sitting there like, I see nothing wrong here. It could have not come from a place of anger. She could have picked her time and place better, sure. But, I think that was the right thing to do, actually. I think it was very important that Feyre knew that. As annoying as Feyre may be, that does not mean that she should not have autonomy over herself and that she should not be able to make decisions for herself. Very gross. But then everyone is furious at Nesta. Like, girl had poor timing and control, but y'all were the real shits in this scenario. But also just in general, all along. It was you, it was not Nesta. Like, I don't understand sort of like this, I don't know, not necessarily villainizing of Nesta, but I think she's painted as far worse in the perspective of others than she actually is or would be. Why is Cassian literally punishing her? That might be my biggest frustration, especially because this is a romance too, and he is her romantic interest, not in fact a villain or a bad guy or an antagonist. He's her love interest. I would understand this sort of anger and coldness towards her if she'd actually done something that was a culmination of her anger to this point, or her arc, something that was actually really messed up. But she didn't, so it feels entirely excessive, the anger and the coldness. But even if she had, in fact, done something to actually merit everyone's anger and coldness, it would never merit punishment. I have a lot of feelings about this. Like, even if a laborious hike is what Cassian thinks she needs, even if it's what she does in fact need, it is nobody else's place to decide that for her, especially not Cassian's. It's not only frustrating how her healing all seems to be funneled through Cassian, but it's also that he's like the source of empowerment always for her. I mean, we talked about that before with her Sarah J. Maas's male leads. And it's also mind-boggling that it's portrayed as healthy to punish somebody you love intentionally and extensively in the pursuit of some sort of like emotional breakthrough. I have also felt the healing properties of pushing myself physically, overcoming adversity, challenges, that sort of thing, but that was my decision to do that, and I think it is imperative that it is somebody's choice how they heal or whatnot. And this portion of the book was very gross to me. Like, how much suffering can one girl endure in the name of healing? And when is it okay to treat somebody the way Cassian treats Nesta? And why is it romanticized or made out as the right thing to do? Why is it when Cassian pushes her, or Cassian literally punishes her like some sort of drill sergeant who's also her lover? Like, what a gross power dynamic. Why is it when that happens that she has this emotional breakthrough in her journey of healing? And why do they immediately get it on? I could feel myself like actively being like, I do not want to internalize this. Like, even if somebody hurts you or they themselves punish you, it's never really the answer. No, it isn't the answer to punish somebody, especially not cruelly and extensively in return. And this wasn't made out to be a bad thing. It was made out to be like the right thing to do, what Cassian does to her on this hike in the mountains. And it would be one thing if that was like his villain origins, and then I'd be like, okay.
Interesting.
But it's very much romanticized. Very toxic energy. She fainted. Why is he driving her past the point of exhaustion?
Oh, so cute. Cassian cares so much. Like, it didn't solve her problems.
Like, such a fucking gross power dynamic.
Mm.
Listen. I am the most here for growth arcs, for personal journeys. In fact, that's like one of my favorite things. But this shit was just painful. Like, in the worst way. This wasn't a satisfying narrative to watch everybody else dictate the path and the circumstances and whatnot of her healing. Also, why is the solution to the trauma? I mean, trauma is not something like an equation with solutions. It's not that easy to solve. But why is the healing to her trauma to fall in love with Cassian? Like, why not herself? And then maybe somebody else. But like, what if it was like someone like Gwen, best character in the book? Somebody who doesn't have a gross power dynamic with Nesta. Doesn't punish her, has great chemistry. I mean, were y'all present for that scene in the chapel sermon thing where Nesta was like low-key, high-key simping for Gwen? Because I was. It doesn't even have to be, so it doesn't have to be a romance. It could just be about Nesta. And I get that this shit is a romance, but that resulted here in a weird romanticization of trauma and punishment and the Nesta and Cassian's weird power dynamic.
Mm.
What about romance just between Nesta and Nesta? Because that's the important thing, I think, in this novel is her journey with herself, and that doesn't come through nearly enough. Like, why must Cassian be the focal point? Man's been in love with her this whole time. We get it. She's also been in love with him this whole time. We also get it. I don't think this book does a very good job handling trauma balanced with romance. Could have been done, not like this. Trauma and its handling aside, when Valkyries were mentioned, I was like, oh no, what's the plan here? But I was like, okay, Norse mythology, like I can get with maybe wherever this is going. But very quickly I started to wonder if maybe Sarah has just watched Thor Ragnarok and was like hype on Tessa Thompson and wanted to have some like badass female energy in some way or form. And she's like,
Valkyries, that's the way to do it.
but you know, whatever, I could still get with it. Except Valkyrie's trained by men. That seems a little bit contradictory. Just a thought. I feel like she would get more gains from her trek up and down the 10,000 steps every day, I think it's every day, or the torture hike in the mountains than training. What's our time span here? Like, how long has she been at this stretch routine? I know they sort of get to other stuff, but it doesn't really seem conceivable to me.
Conceivable! You keep using the word. I do not think it means what you think it means.
I mean, I know we've all seen it before. This, like, female character who will train for a couple months and then she'll be like,
Yes, it is. I, warrior woman, trained by man, and I am now the master, but also will probably sleep with the man who trained me.
it's just this book specifically, but there are so many more exactly like that. Also, Nesta just has to dance with Eris. Like, it's the only way to ensure that the alliance is sound and that he feels respected. And it's definitely not another thinly veiled plotline, but this time it's a jealousy plotline for Cassian and his possession issues. But it's not his fault. He's a Fey male, and she's his female. What's that? She's also his mate? And what's that? He knew all along? I wonder, where have we seen this before? The brief portions of this book that are about women supporting women and healing together are pretty alright, especially because Gwen was a surprisingly wonderful character, and so was Emery.
Just how I like my representation. So subtle and practically non-existent that I don't even notice it until I Google a character's name.
But it wasn't a present enough part of the book, neither was the other methods Nesta used to heal, such as meditation, things that really the things that weren't in conjunction to Cassian, things that he didn't make her endure, should have been focused on more, I think. Also,
What left the house so broken? I want 800 pages on that. I'm pretty curious.
there's also a quote somewhere in here, I'll put it up, something that basically equates like swagger and Cassian's walk, and like how that is an indicator that a man knows how to use his. I would go so far as to say that I generally equate things like swagger with not knowing how to use it, but maybe that is just me. Then we get to my favorite part of the book, like actually, which is Sarah J. Maas's take on the Hunger Games, but make it fairies. When did they train for this? I know they trained every day, but when did they train for this? That aside, though, these are the few passages that are the most entertaining and exciting in the book, including the smut scenes. Not as hype as this. I think this should have been expanded upon more, maybe. Wasn't really chapped, but I'm gonna do that anyways. I don't know, sort of disappointing that she didn't also touch the stone with her besties, I think didn't really seem like a good reason for her not to. I think the plot could have been relatively the same if she had. It's not really a big thing. It just bothered me. Would have been more satisfying. That was maybe like the one part of the book that I was invested in. So I thought Sarah J. Maas was going to kill Feyre and Rysand. I didn't actually. I knew she wouldn't. But I wanted it. Imagine if she had. That bit was whatever. It wasn't really the most culminative of the arc of the story of Nesta, of anything, really. The climax of this novel, every time I say that word, I'm like, ha 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 ha. Climax of the novel was cheapened with the throw some magic at it and it'll go away trope, but like so literally, it was very painful. The word of this book, painful. It felt really suddenly rushed after the pacing of the rest of the book, like the whole plotline with Bibbidi Boo, that the queen, the old queen. So forgettable, could have cared less about it. This is probably the only mention of it I will give. Then Nesta giving up her powers feels pretty disappointing also, because she was just sort of exploring them. She didn't understand them fully. One of the more interesting parts of this book. And to have her just, she's like, I give back, you tell me how. I was so dumb. So then the magic just tells her how to save Feyre, I guess, and she makes her pelvis wider so she can someday have winged babies in the process, just because. But she keeps a little bit of power, I guess. I don't know. Nesta being like Death was a cooler arc for me. Like, ditch Cassian, become Death incarnate. Well, no, see what happens with Gwen. I don't know. Have at it. That would have been better. Nevertheless, I digress. Those are sort of synonymous statements. Let's get to the meat of my beef. I mostly find it incredibly problematic that these books are read by such a young audience, or any audience, and portray such harmful, unrealistic stereotypes around relationship trauma, sex, and so on and so forth. I understand that that is sort of the point of these books, that sort of unrealistic nature, the fantasy, but I think we deserve better. Especially when in the past they were YA novels and are still going to attract that audience, except Maybe by the time they trek through all these books, they will actually be adults because they're so long and drawn out. Ha 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 ha. This is not specifically Sarah's fault. You know, she didn't create this culture. I think it is definitely more a fault of the culture that we have around sex and romance, and especially sexual education. So I'm not necessarily blaming Sarah J. Maas, although I don't think it's wrong to maybe expect more from her. The sex scenes themselves are hard, ha 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 ha, to sit through and largely inaccurate. They follow this theme of being taken and shattering and etc., and they don't really paint a ton of reality. Language used in intimacy is very ownership-y, but also just really uncomfortable in a yikesy, toxic-y way. The romances and intimate scenes are also very heteronormative, tend toward a lot of male dominance, and not to mention, they're very repetitive. And in that regard, not all that wild, or even out there, or representative of any kind of variety and experience. And they ain't even really that kinky. Just the most horny anyone has ever been, ever. Which is also misleading. Could not relate personally. You know, I don't walk around curling my toes all day. I think it's dangerous to learn from this material, not only because of the toxic behaviors, but also because of the narrow views and perspectives of sexuality presented in the acts themselves and in the sexualities of the characters. Side note, what happened to Moore? She just like disappears. It almost feels like Sarah doesn't want to write her or doesn't know how to. I don't know what the deal is there. But that's also disappointing as well. It can be isolating to grow up and not have your experiences reflected in the bullshit that you read in books or in other medias that you consume. I personally read some of Sarah's books back when I was younger, and trying to understand things like sex and romance and sexuality and identity. And I honestly feel like this stuff was stunting. I internalized so much of this hyper-erotic writing and the unrealistic tropes. And this was an example I had to look up to. And obviously that was in more of her YA novels, but as I said previously, I think they're problematic in similar ways. Real sex and healthy relationships can be sexy too. Sexier. I think awareness about these things is important, and also maybe this shouldn't be a thing that young people turn to. Definitely not for an education, especially since that's not really provided elsewhere, except for things like media, such as these books. Especially in our culture of shame around sex and sexual education, which is, I think, a dilemma in the majority of the world right now as well. If you enjoy reading these books, continue to enjoy reading these books. It's your choice, as Rysand likes to say. And I respect it when it isn't harming others. I just hope to sort of poke some fun at these books and maybe open up a conversation. Maybe, just maybe, we can spread something more positive than Nesta and Cassian did for 800 pages too long. Anywho, this kind of book clogs my mental pores, and I very much need to cleanse them. Like, I just spent way too many hours pounding, haha, these shitty stereotypes and toxic behaviors and limited viewpoints into my brain. Thanks for watching, if anyone is. And hopefully you'll see me here sometime again soon. Bye, I guess.